FIFA is about to make more money from a single tournament than most Fortune 500 companies make in a year, and the cities hosting it are going broke doing them the favor. The World Cup kicked off on June 11th in the US, Canada, and Mexico, in front of a global audience of 5 billion people. FIFA will pocket somewhere around $13 billion from this tournament. Not the players, not the stadiums, not the cities whose names are on the marquee. FIFA. Meanwhile, the 11 US host cities are staring down a collective shortfall of at least $250 million because your city's public budget, the one that pays for your roads, your police, your transit, might be quietly footing the bill for a private organization's payday. Traditional sports media is calling this the greatest show on earth. Nobody's calling it what it actually is, one of the most lopsided financial arrangements in modern sports. But to understand how FIFA pulled this off, you first have to understand how the World Cup used to work and why that changed. Before I get into why your city's fire department budget might be connected to a McDonald's sponsorship deal, we need to cover how FIFA rewrote its own rulebook. For most of the World Cup's history, the tournament was run by a local organizing committee. That committee absorbed the costs, but it also kept a share of the upside. Think of it like a local franchise owner. They take on risk because they also get to keep some of the profit. That's how it worked in Brazil in 2014. That's how it worked in Russia in 2018. Cities and countries took a gamble, but there was at least a shared incentive between the host and the organizer. The 2026 World Cup broke that model completely. For the first time in the tournament's history, FIFA is operating the event directly, not through national federations, not through local committees. FIFA itself. And because FIFA is running the show directly, it now controls essentially all of the revenue. Media rights, sponsorships, ticketing, hospitality, merchandise, while the host cities are left holding the costs. Security, transportation, stadium retrofits, public fan zones. Meet Sarah. Sarah is a city budget director in one of the 11 US host cities. Her job this year is to find the money for extra police overtime, road closures, transit upgrades, and stadium security because her city agreed to host 4 to 8 World Cup matches. But when Sarah looks for a way to offset those costs, she finds the revenue doors locked. She can't touch ticket sales because FIFA keeps those. She can't touch broadcast money because FIFA keeps that too. She's told she can chase local sponsorship deals to help cover the gap until she discovers FIFA has locked up nearly every valuable sponsorship category for its own global partners. Because FIFA structured it this way, cities like Sarah's don't share in the upside anymore. They only absorb the downside. And because the contracts were negotiated city by city, most mayors signed them years before the true price tag became clear. That's when it gets complicated. Here's the part that sounds almost too absurd to be real. FIFA actually told host cities they could sell local sponsorships to help cover their expenses. Then it made that nearly impossible because it locked up the market categories for its own official partners. Cities couldn't even sign a local convenience store chain because that store sells food, and food sales were ruled to conflict with FIFA's official partner, McDonald's. A city trying to offset a 9-figure security bill got blocked from a sponsorship deal with a gas station because of a hamburger chain. Economist Andrew Zimbalist of Smith College, who has studied mega event economics for decades, described the arrangement as a structurally losing proposition, pointing out that host cities face very significant costs while hosting anywhere from 4 to 8 games each. In his own words, none of the host cities will benefit economically from the World Cup because they don't get the revenue. They get the costs, and those costs can run well over $100 million per city. Think about it like renting out your house for a party you're not invited to. You pay for the cleanup crew, the extra insurance, the parking attendants, but the person throwing the party keeps every dollar from the ticket sales at the door. That's effectively the deal 11 American cities signed. And once you understand that FIFA restructured the entire tournament into what's essentially a franchise model, where the franchisees pay to run the business and the franchisor keeps the receipts, you start to see why the math never worked in the city's favor to begin with. But here's where the mainstream explanation starts to break. The story you're being told is that hosting the World Cup is an economic win for cities. Tourism, jobs, global exposure. That's the pitch FIFA sells, and it's the pitch most local news coverage repeats without asking who actually profits. The reality is messier and more damaging. FIFA and the World Trade Organization jointly projected $80 billion in gross economic impact from this tournament, with over $30 billion of that landing in the US. But independent economists have picked that projection apart. Those kinds of studies typically assume that every dollar a tourist spends at the World Cup is a brand new dollar entering the local economy, when in reality, some of that spending is just money that would have been spent locally anyway on other things. Economists call this the substitution effect. And there's a second problem: crowding out. When a city fills up with World Cup traffic, congestion, and inflated hotel prices, regular tourists and business travelers often just stay away. So the visitors FIFA promises don't always show up as pure economic gain. Some of them are simply replacing visitors who would have come anyway, or displacing visitors who now won't. New York City's own comptroller ran these numbers for his own city and found the additional tax revenue wouldn't come close to covering the price tag. This isn't activist speculation. It's the city's own fiscal watchdog. And if the city that hosts the actual World Cup final can't make the math work, something is structurally broken in how this deal was built from the start. So here's what actually happens once you follow the money past the headlines. Domino 1. The revenue gets centralized at FIFA, while the costs get decentralized across 11 separate city governments. That means no single city has real negotiating leverage. Because FIFA isn't negotiating with one city with real bargaining power, it's negotiating 11 separate deals, each competing for the prestige of being a host. And that triggers the second problem. Because sponsorship categories are locked up for FIFA's global partners, cities can't generate their own offsetting revenue even when they try. A Forbes investigation, co-published with the Houston Chronicle and Texas Tribune, found that Texas taxpayers are likely on the hook again as Houston and Dallas host matches. Subsidizing a tournament FIFA itself has said will generate roughly $11 billion in profit. And many of these host city contracts are still confidential, with financial terms redacted from public view. Taxpayers are funding a deal they're not even allowed to fully read. And because of that, the third domino is already falling, straight into your city's budget, whether you bought a ticket or not. When a city overspends on security, transit, and stadium retrofits without matching revenue, that gap doesn't just disappear. It gets absorbed by the same general fund that pays for schools, road repair, and emergency services. If your city government approved World Cup hosting costs and the promised tourism boom underdelivers, which multiple economists now expect, given ticket sales have been running behind projections, the shortfall doesn't hit FIFA's balance sheet. It hits yours through the same budget that funds the things you actually depend on every day. So let's go back to the claim I opened with. FIFA is on track to collect somewhere around $13 billion from this tournament, while the cities hosting it are staring down a $250 million collective shortfall. And that's not an accident or bad luck or just how big events work. It's the direct result of a deal FIFA rebuilt from the ground up, one where it centralized every dollar of revenue and pushed every dollar of risk down to the local level. The mainstream story is that the World Cup is good for host cities. The real story is that FIFA engineered a model where it captures nearly all the upside and hands host cities nearly all the downside, then locked up the one tool, local sponsorship, that might have let cities close the gap themselves. That's the scam. Not hidden fraud, just a business model so lopsided it barely needs to hide. Traditional sports media won't tell you this story clearly, because FIFA is also the entity that controls their broadcast access, their sponsorship relationships, and their credentials to the very event they're covering.